All right. Hi. Hello. Can you guys? Okay. I hope you are all here. Good morning, everybody. So I hope you're all doing well. Today we start. This is primarily for my class. So welcome back, everybody. And today in this lecture we'll be discussing about Edmund Burke. So what what do we think? For instance, the last time we spoke of Montesquieu, and you see, there is this one really how do I put it? Interesting thing that happened in the late 18th century and at the turn of the century of the 19th. So what happened is this. You see, we were discussing about Hobbes. We discussed about Locke. We also discussed about Montesquieu. And we also discussed, if you remember, we also discussed about Aristotle, right? So the thing is this: there was this one event that really had a huge impact on political thought, not just in political thought, but in the way people perceive things, perceive their identity, right? And it has had a huge impact ever since. And of course, the event which we are talking about, which I am talking about, which we will be discussing about, is the French Revolution. You see, we can't really undermine the historical importance, at least in the Western civilization, uh, the importance of the French Revolution. And there are several reasons as to why it is very, very important. But then, in this regard, I would like to, mainly discuss some of the unfolding of events that led to a reaction against this idea that really gave an impetus, right? That really gave a force, that really gave an impetus to this whole notion of what is known as the French Revolution. And this is where we discuss about Edmund Burke. You see, many political thinkers and many thinkers likewise, they tend to equate Edmund Burke into this category of, you see, of conservatives, right? So, in if you look at the broad political spectrum, you see, we have you have the liberals on one side, right, and then you have the conservative on the other side. And then what happens? The thing is this: what happens with society in general and with most political thinkers, especially, is that we tend to we tend to categorize each person where they are, right? We tend to fit them, right, or categories, right? But then if you actually read Burke, you will find that it is unfair, right? It is very, very unfair to say that, and even to categorize him, and even and to pigeonhole him into this thing called conservative, right? Which I think, if you have actually, if you're being honest, and if you read him with an honest, open mind, I think it's very quite difficult to categorize him as to where he belongs, because he supports pretty much, all the ideas throughout the political spectrum. So, I mean, that's my take. I mean, everybody has their own take, but then that's essentially what I feel it is. So the thing is this: when for instance, um, come to talk about when we come to talk about the French Revolution, you see, the reason why I say it has a huge impact is mainly because of this. It's precisely mostly because of this. You see, it brought a dramatic change, right? It brought a dramatic change in terms of the way modern society itself is organized, right? So, for example, today we discuss about what is known as, nation, right? Nation states. And that's where we usually, that's where we tend to, the French Revolution is where we tend to usually equate, okay, this is where you started, right? That's where we first get the idea of the broad nation state. Okay, but nevertheless, this this the whole French Revolution, it brought when it first happened, when it occurred, right, the whole revolution as such. What happened was that people did not really. I mean, there was a huge, not people did not, but then there was a huge euphoria, right, an absolute optimism about the end of, say, for instance, monarchy in Europe, the end of oppression, and realization of liberty, right? The realization of the autonomy of the individual, then the autonomy and the realization of the freedom of human ingenuity, of human trade, of human connection, and human possibilities, the triumph of science, the triumph, especially the triumph of reason, right? And what happened was that it brought a lot of youth, a lot of optimism that things are going to change. Things are finally going to change in Europe. And again, we don't. Many people. I mean, say for instance, if you and I were in France, right? If you and I were in France, maybe we too would have welcomed the French Revolution with same sort of zeal that the majority of the French people actually, welcomed the revolution itself. But then, like everything else in the world, like everything else in life, things are not usually what they seem they are at first, right? Things may usually start good at the beginning, right? At the beginning, it may be very, very good. Things may look optimism, right? It may be very, very optimistic about the possibilities of everything. But then, as things progress, we tend to things don't really turn out the way we planned, right? Things don't turn out the way we planned. It goes awry, right? Things don't fall into place, and then guess what? Things are much more worse than they were before. So that's exactly more or less what happened with the French Revolution. But the reason why we are talking about this context, right? This context of French Revolution is because it will give you a clear idea, or like the context behind where we can understand Burke. You see, because it's very difficult. I mean, if you have no idea about the French Revolution, it's very difficult it's very difficult for you to even grasp what Burke is saying, or the main tenets of his ideas. You see, his philosophical ideas, his political philosophy of his, is that you must understand him within the context, especially his major work, right? For instance, the reflection, which we actually base this lecture on, is that you can only understand him properly and prudently if you truly, I mean, if you kind of understand the context, the French Revolution, the context in which he wrote his masterpiece, but his most renowned work in political thought. So, so yeah, the French Revolution, right? Now, I hope that you have actually read. I do actually hope that you have actually read the reading materials, right? Because our this lecture is based on that, and I'm assuming that you have, right? And if you have not, then don't worry, that's fine. You don't have to read. What's the point, right? You can just watch the video and you learn, right? I'm just lying, but you should read, all right? But you should read, definitely read. So here we go. Now, um, the ideas of Burke is, many people tend to, like I said, many people tend to equate him, he tend to say that he belongs to this conservative spectrum of political ideologies, right? But then, if you actually think about it, he was never really, you can't never really say, and if you have read the reading materials for the class, you really can't say that he belongs to a conservative, right? And the thing is this, what do we mean by conservative, right? Now, if I ask you this question, what do we mean by conservative? What would it be? What would you say? How would you define what a conservative is, right? Right? Now, if I ask you, do you know the idea? Can you briefly tell me, some of the ideas or some of the beliefs a liberal person will hold? Right? You may say, well, you believe in changes. Maybe in whatever sense you believe in liberty, right? You believe in the freedom of speech, right? That's fine, good. And if I ask you conservative, if I say you are a very conservative person or I am a very conservative person, now how would you take that, right? Now we can clearly say if I say that okay, you are a conservative person, then you know what that means, right? You're quite open-minded. Like people nowadays, people tend to equate that, right? Liberal means, or if you're a liberal person, then you are quite open-minded, quite broad-minded. Yeah, we tend to say that, we tend to equate that, we tend to slap that onto the person who is liberal, right? But say for instance that, and of course that's not really the case, but then, and say for instance that if I say that I am a conservative, right, or you are a conservative, then what do I mean by that? What do I mean when I say that I am a conservative or you are a conservative? What do you mean by that? So in most cases, the first thing that comes to your head, right, or the first thing that comes to your mind whenever we say, "Oh, you are very conservative," right, and you're like, "What is it? What is the first? What is the first thing that comes to our mind, right?" Whenever we say, I just I like to laugh at everything. That's the point of life, right? It's good. You should have a good sense of humor. That's what keeps us sane in this insanity, right? The world filled with insanities. So when I say you are a conservative person, what do we mean by that? What is the first thing that comes to your first thing that comes to your mind whenever you hear somebody say, "Oh, he's very conservative. She's very conservative. You are very conservative. I am a very conservative person." Now, obviously, the first thing that comes to your mind is not good thing, right? Right? Nothing positive about conservative. Yes or not? Yeah, like yeah. So, like one of the most very common mundane argument that is put on to a person who is deemed to be conservative is simply this, like, oh, you're close-minded, right? Yeah, you believe in tradition, you try to hold on to a traditions which is long dead, right? Which is not relevant in this modern day, in this day and age, right? You are very close-minded, you're not open to new things, right? You you tend to uh, you tend to neglect, or say, for the most common word, you're biased against, say for instance, people of different religion, of different of people of different culture, of different race, of different sexual orientations, whatnot, right? And that's fine. And even in politics, we find that you have political parties who usually tend to say that they are liberals, right? Like for instance, in India, we say that maybe if you look at, for instance, in India, you have Congress, and then you have BJP, just the two main political parties in India. Of course, we have so many political parties, but then just for the sake of simplicity, and say for the sake of simplicity of understanding, this in India we have BJP and we have Congress. So if you try to put them in the political spectrum, Congress would fall under liberal, right? So, say for instance, that would be the equivalent of Democrats in America, right? Or the Labour in United Kingdom. While the BJP would fall under what is known would fall on the conservative spectrum of the political ideology, right? Which would be equivalent to, say, for instance, the Republican in the United States of America, and then the conservative in United Kingdom. So you have these political parties that are split into two, more or less. You have one liberal and you have the other, the BJP, which is more conservative. Now, if we ask you, or if you say, for instance, you ask a person in America or in the United Kingdom, and then you ask, well, what does the Republican stands for, or what do they stand for, or what do the conservatives stand for, right? The some of the main are not arguments, but some of the key beliefs which one would label a conservative with is that they are quite nationalistic, maybe. They are quite conservative in their outlook, right? They believe in, say, for instance, they are more or less like they believe in traditions in India, for instance, the BJP going back to Hinduism, whatnot. Then they believe in the superiority of their own, whatever it is, the religion or race, whatnot, blah blah blah. They then then they don't like changes. Changes is not good for them, and then they're not very open to new things. While, for instance, if you look at the Congress, of course, nobody likes Congress. Who does, right? In India. But then, if you look at the Congress, we would equate them. Okay, well, they are quite open, right? Open to changes. They are, open to trade, but not moreover. They don't try to. They are less conservative, or they are more open to people of different race and different culture and different religion, blah blah blah, whatnot. Right? All the good things which we in the modern society deem is good, we try to label them with liberalism, right? And then all the bad things which the modern society tend to look down upon, we simply give all of that package to the conservative. But then that's what it is right now. But then in reality, it's very imprudent, right? It's very imprudent and unwise to simply give the whole basket to, okay, all the good things, here you go, to the liberals, and all the bad things, there we go, to the conservative. That creates a very toxic environment, and it leads to biases. You see, unnecessary biases, because nobody listens to each other if you simply just do that, right? Because we don't like to hear each other out. There's no dialogue. There's no talking, right? There's no conversation. So if there's no conversation, then nothing really happens. So that's what it is. So for now, the idea of spectrum, right? Right? I hope you do. So now there we are. There we have it, the conservatives and the liberals. Now, given such is the spectrum, the political spectrum, and given the context, the French Revolution, in which we find ourselves in, i.e., Edmund Burke. Now, how do we define him, or like how do we not define him? Because you should not define anything or anybody. But then, how do we best understand the ideas of Edmund Burke, right? And one of the key contribution, one of the crucial contribution of Edmund Burke in political thought is his criticism, right? Is his criticism of the abstract rights, right? Of the abstract rights, and by this I simply mean this. You see, if you remember, we discussed about, say, for instance, John Locke, right? When we discuss Locke, and if you have, and now that we have read Locke, we know what it is. We tend to see this idea of natural rights, right? Natural rights. Your natural rights. What are those natural rights? Of course, we discuss, and then those natural rights are your life, liberty, and for him, state or the property, right? So John Locke tends to equate. He equated, right? Natural rights are certain rights which are quite inalienable from the person, from the individual, right? So it's you. So if you are a person, an individual, then Locke says, and that's the more or less the dictum of liberal ideology, is that if you are an individual, if you are a person, you have an inalienable rights, and those inalienable rights are your life, your property, and liberty. Now, we saw, and because we have discussed in the class, that we saw how important these rights were for liberals, for liberal ideas, especially even for Locke. Because remember, Locke was highly influential with the American Revolution, as well as with the French, especially with the French, Locke and Montesquieu and Rousseau, right? And all that. And we can also include, who was it? Voltaire, right? But nevertheless, sticking with the political ideology, political thoughts, We know that the liberals and John Locke, they put a huge emphasis. They stress the importance of 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 um, of of these natural rights. And Burke, what Edmund Burke did was he criticized those rights, not necessarily against Locke, because he did actually belong to this. He did actually belong to the Liberal Party, right? The Whigs, right? The Liberal Party, because he was a member of Parliament. Edmund Burke was a member of Parliament, right? He was actually participating. He was actually doing things in politics. So he belonged to not the Conservative, the Tories, but the Whigs, the Liberal, right? He belonged to that party. But nevertheless, he did criticize some of the key tenets or the key principles of their party or their of their liberal ideas, right, which their party stood for. So in doing so, what he was trying to say, and if you actually read carefully, and if you actually pay attention to what Burke was saying, and you'll find that his criticism is quite sound. It's not sound in the sense sound, but then it's quite valid as long as you have an open mind and if you're not very close to new ideas or close to dialogue and understanding. What he says do resonate very well with you as long as you're a human being. You would kind of say, even if you don't agree with him completely, you say, ah, yeah, that makes sense, right? So, so one of his main, some of his main contribution to political thought was the is his criticism of this abstract natural rights, because you see, because the liberals and Locke emphasized the natural rights, right? What Burke was saying was that, you see, but rights themselves are not necessarily concrete, right? Concrete. You see, like, this is concrete, right? You can see it. So it has to be concrete, right? It's better to have a society which is built on which is built on rights which are concrete and which you can actually exercise them, right? Rather than you should not. It's no point trying to organize a society, right? And of course, political thoughts are all about how do we best organize a society, right? And come together and form this political community. So so the thing is, there's no point trying to organize a society based on these abstract rights, right? Rights. What are rights? Can you see rights, right? Can you see rights? Can you see rights? But I can't, right? Even you're watching this video because I told you to, right? You have no choice, right? Even if you don't watch it now, you'll have to watch it later on, right? So you have no rights. But what I'm trying to say is this simply. You see, what Burke was against was that you can't literally base or try to formulate or try to organize a society based on some abstract reality, right? Which never corresponds and which is never as simple or as perfect as you wish it can be, right? Because it will never be. Because the reality, what Burke was saying was that you must understand the complexities of the reality itself, right? Because the reality, the society in which we live, in which we dwell, and in which society must come together, right? Right? Must come together and live together and cooperate together and sustain themselves cannot be based on simple abstract rights, right? That's what he was saying. And that was his whole criticism of the French Revolution, right? Some say that Burke was anti-enlightenment, right? Okay, well, obviously, those who say that are, who they are, right? Because they are very close-minded. They claim to be open-minded, but they are not. I suppose, right? Am I right to say that? Maybe. But nevertheless, some say that some say that he's anti-enlightenment, right? He's anti-reason. But if you actually think about it, he's not. What he's saying is quite true. How can you, because the thing is, it's not easy for diverse individuals with diverse interests, right? That has diverse interests, right? Follows different values, follows different religion, who knows, even speaks different languages to come together and organize together and live in harmony, right? And make things work, right? Right? Not only that, they must cooperate with each other, right? Cooperate with each other despite all the differences, and also sustain themselves, sustain the society, right? Without sustain the society without ruining the society in which they live, right? It's very, very difficult. It's not easy for people to come together and form a society, a political community, right? So so Burke was saying, you see, it's not an easy job. Not only is it not easy, but then to try to come together, right? To try to form a political community based on some abstract, some unreal thing, right? Some abstract which you can't see, not concrete. To build on some abstract ideas such as the universal human, the universal human rights, or the universal rights, the universal rights of the individual, right? To live as they want, to speak as they wish, to say whatever they want, to form. It's absolutely madness, right? Of course, he doesn't say madness, but it's close to madness. That's obviously that's what he says, not directly, but obviously indirectly. He says, it's pure madness, right? I mean, it's like this. For instance, the Universal Declaration, right? It says the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because I was just doing some research. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, drafted in 1948, states the following, right? Just listen to me carefully, right? It says everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. Right? Now here's the thing. Now that's a bold declaration of some abstract natural rights, abstract natural human rights. Now the thing is this. Now what Burke is simply saying is that, well, can you really, what does it mean by this right to rest and leisure? Right? Rest and leisure. What do we mean by those things? And under what circumstances under what circumstances should we make this available to everybody, right? For instance, another example would be this. Very, very simple example is this universal right to education, right? In some countries, I think even in India, I think we had that. I think we still have it in our constitution. There's the universal right to education, right? Now, this universal right, like the abstract right to education. In other words, by that, what we mean is that every children to a certain age, right, is guaranteed school education, right, primary school education. Now the thing is this: what does it do? Not only that, the thing is this: by universal education, yes, we are saying education to everybody, right? Right? Education to everybody. Yes, good, very good. So we may ask, why the education to everybody? Why should everybody be educated? Why is education a is it a necessity, right? Is it a necessity in any society, right? You may ask that. Is it truly possible? Is it not just? Is Of course it's possible, but then is it truly needed? You see, is universal education. In other words, should everyone go have education, at least a primary education, primary school education? Is that a necessity? No, if you actually think about it, it's not, right? It's not. The idea of this natural uh, universal education, what it simply does is this, right? It only makes the standards lower, right? It only decreases, or it only lowers the standards of education, right? And if you lower the standards of education, right, then what is the point of education, right? Isn't education supposed to make you more, I suppose we say, more rational, right? More reasonable, right? more open to new ideas, whatnot, more broad mind, right? But then, if you try to say that, okay, universal education to everybody, everyone must have universal education, and hence what we do is that we simply say, okay, you know what, we're just going to lower the standards, right? We're going to lower the standards so that everybody gets education. Now, is that fair? Right? Is that fair to lower the education standards so that everybody gets an education? In many sense, it is not. And in reality, having such policies is not good for the society in the long run, right? In a society, what you're producing are not educated persons, but then a person, but then you're producing more, forgive my word, but then let's screw it, right? But then what you're doing is that you're producing more people who are dumb, right? You're producing more dumb people, right? That's what happens. That's why now you'll find in modern day, in modern societies, most modern societies where you have universal education throughout the society, you see lots of dumb people, right? Right? Even the quality of education has come down dramatically, drastically, right? It has, right? Why? Because you're just lowering the educational standard. Now, is that good in the long run for the society? Of course not. It's not good, right? So what does okay? In simple terms, that's what Burke is saying, right? You can't try to bring about changes in the society or try to do anything in the society based on these abstract realities or abstract realities such as rights, natural rights, which you can't see, which you can't touch, right? It's all abstract. What you're saying is that you're trying to put these philosophical ideas, which is not real, right? You're giving it more importance than the reality themselves, because the reality is very, very different, right? You can't make the reality according to your plan, according to your ideas, according to your theoretical ideas, according to your philosophical ideas, because the reality is never like that. The reality is vastly complex, vastly diverse, and vastly chaotic. In order to bring any sort of idea, in order to bring any sort of order to it, right? You must not base any sort of construction of society, construction of or alleviation of problems in the society basing on these abstract philosophical ideas, which Burke was saying, which most of the previous at his age, most of the philosophers have done so, right? And he was saying that in direct criticism of the French Revolution. Why? Because the French Revolution was based on these abstract ideas of this right, this natural right, the right of man, right? The right of man, the right to life, liberty, blah blah blah, all the all the glorious things that an individual is possible, that the individual has potentials to fulfill, all the possibilities which, if only if only if only the society will allow the individuals to exercise these natural rights, whatever the natural rights are, right? And what we see is that, so Burke was saying, you see, this was wrong. Not only is it not wrong, not only is it wrong, but also the consequences of trying to change the society or change the society or organize the society or structure the society or whatever you may call it based on these abstract ideals which the liberal ideology tends to hold there, is that what Burke was saying was that to base or to construct or to structure society based on these abstract ideals, vastly abstract ideals, abstract philosophical ideals, will create, will result in something which they did not anticipate, right? The result will be totally opposite. The results will be diametrically opposite to what they intended, right? The result will be what they did not intend. And that is precisely what happened, right? Now, the French Revolution, no, because whenever we speak of revolution, right, we speak of revolution, whatever the revolution means, right? People think it is good. If you need any kind of changes in a society, if you want to make your society good, if you want to make your society great, if you want to make your society whatever, right? All the good things. You think, people say change is not enough. We must Simple changes or simple reforms is not enough. What we now need is a revolution, a total, dramatic, utter change. Right? We are going to destroy the old and construct something in its place. Right? That's revolution. So what he was saying was that, you see, to try to construct your society based on such abstract ideals, hoping that you will make your society perfect and good and great, and nothing bad will ever happen, nothing evil will ever happen in such kind of society, is bull crap, right? It's a lie. That's what he was saying. It's an utter lie. It's imprudent even to think that. Now I ask you, right? Think for a minute here, right? Just I'll give you a minute too. Just think about it, right? Just scratch your head and see if what he's saying do hold water. Because ask yourself these questions. Now, for instance, in Nagaland, right? Nagaland or Assam or Arunachal or Manipur, wherever you are, wherever you are, watching from. See, especially because we are in Nagaland. So here in Nagaland, there are so many problems in our society, right? And you say, well, because our society is not good, corruption, tribalism, blah blah blah. Hence, minor incremental reforms will not work. It will never work. We have tried, but it does not work. Hence, what we have to do is that we have to literally destroy everything, right? Destroy the old, put in its place something new, right? And things will be perfect, right? And some no, there's so many people. There's so many people who says that if you only remove all these the present elements, the present problems in in society in Nagaland, corruption, tribalism, now all these things. If you only clean them up, then most people earnestly, right? They're so stupid. Earnestly say, no, Nagaland will be heaven here on earth. But no, it's not possible. I'm sorry, right? There'll never be heaven here on. No, you see that's the sort of that's the sort of ignorance. That's the proof of universal education. You see, because people think that if you only remove the corruption, if you only remove tribalism, then Nagaland will be very, very good. There will be no problem as such. All the problems we are facing will never be there, right? Will be all gone, right? Nagaland will be heaven here on earth. And those people who are uttering that are pure. I mean, they've literally gone mad. Oh, I should not say that, but then they are the product of universal education, right? They've got that's why lower standards of education. So they think that reality is that simple. The problem is very simple: tribalism, right? Corruption. Get rid of them. If you get rid of them, everything will be good. Everything will be fine. But is it? Is that the answer? Is that true? Because you see, if you have read, if you have been a acute observer of society, then you will find that, you see, everything in society is interconnected, right? Everything is interconnected. No single strand, no single aspect of a society is independent of its own, right? Somehow they are intricately tied together. They're intricately tied together and interlinked and interdependent. If you change one thing, it changes the whole system, right? It's just like that. It's human society is more or less like a human body, right? If I have a headache, right? A headache that happens here in the head, right? But then it affects every part of my body, right? It does. If I injure myself, if I say for instance, if I if I fracture my fingers, right? It affects every part of my being, right? It hurts me, right? Right? It does. And if I have a stomach ache, it affects every part of my being, right? Yes or no? If you hit yourself accidentally, it hurts you everywhere, right? So much in the same way, that's what society is. And those people who think that, oh, if you only remove corruption and tribalism, everything will be fine. Try that and see. Let's see, right? That's not it. That's what Burke was saying. That society is very complex, right? It's so complex And you must understand that everything, that every part of a society is interlinked, is interdependent. You see, if you've actually read the readings, the reading materials which I've given you, then you would have understood that Burke is it's very similar. His ideas are very similar to Montesquieu, right, and Aristotle. Same thing with Aristotle and Montesquieu. They saw society to be intimately tied together. Like everything in the society is linked together, right? You can't separate them. No entity, no aspect of a society is independent of its own. But if you change this part, other parts of the society will remain unaffected. No. If you change this, you inevitably change all of it, right? So much in the same way, that's what Burke was saying. I mean, we'll get into this more in detail later on, but then just to give you an overview of what they're discussing, and then the context in which we must understand Burke is this, right? And everything is interconnected. You try to change one thing, everything changes, right? They do, right? If you have a heart operation, right? You're just having a heart operation. You're trying to something is wrong with your heart. You fix that, but then in if your heart is not working well, it affects every part of your body, right? It affects the functioning of some of the other parts of the body. Yes or no, right? They do. So much in the same way, this all of these thinkers, Montesquieu, Aristotle, and Burke, and of course, I'm very sure. We know that Burke was influenced from Montesquieu, but also we can be sure because of his ideas, of the languages he uses, and whatever he proposes is it's very reminiscent of the views of Aristotle, and of course, who wouldn't be, right? Of course. So he sees that everything is interconnected. Remember, and much in the same way, societies are different, right? Societies are different. It's not the same, right? And that echoes the ideas of Montesquieu, right? So if you have, and then the good thing is that we have already discussed Aristotle, right, in previous lectures, and we also discussed Aristotle and Montesquieu, right. So now Burke should be an easy read. I mean to understand, I suppose, because we know at least where he's coming from, or the philosophers or thinkers who had had a much influence on his ideas. So much in the same way, Burke says, that's what it is. You can't just stupidly try to change one thing, thinking that if you just only change this problem, everything will be the same, right? That's what most people in Nagaland think, right? If you go and ask any people in Nagaland, oh, we have a problem over here. How do we change it? Oh, tribalism. Oh, corruption. If you change that, everything is fine. No, it's not. It's not. It's not fine. It's not the same. It's not the same. It's different because people who don't know how complex a society is and who thinks that they know everything, they'll say, oh, the problem is corruption, get rid of it. The problem is tribalism, get rid of it, and everything will be fine. No, it will not be fine, right? It will not be fine. They exist in a society, right? There's a reason why they exist in a society. If you don't know the function, even though they may hinder some progress, they nevertheless did serve a function some time ago, right? You must understand what function it served, right? And in trying to understand that, maybe you understand why it needs to be changed or it needs to be reformed or something along that line, but not drastically or just remove from the very face of the earth. That's not possible, right? You may try to eradicate corruption. It's not possible. Corruption will exist. It exists in every society, right? No society, right? No country in the world is untouched by corruption, right? Every country is corrupt. It would be, and for you, and if anyone believes that some countries are not corrupt at all, then you are quite delusional, right? It's better not to think that, okay? But then every country is corrupt, so you can never remove corruption. And for somebody to say, sitting here in Nagaland and say, oh, corruption, just get rid of corruption, no, if not more, right? You must go and do a lot more reading, right? So that's what he was saying. So that is what Burke was saying, that the society is it's too complicated. Every part of society is intimately and intricately linked and interdependent on each other, right? And hence, You can't just simply say that things are just, if you just change these things randomly, and then if you see a problem over here, you just remove that and everything will be fine. Because it's not. Even these problems have linkages, right? Get linked to something else. We'll get to these things more in detail in the next class. But then for now, this should I think that should do. All right. So for today, we'll end here. It's already 45 minutes, and this is the first time streaming on YouTube, right? So please subscribe. But nevertheless, this is the first time. So we'll end here, and for the next time we live stream, we'll go a bit longer than this. All right. So, and by the way, if you have not if you have not read the reading materials, please do, right? Please do. I beg you, really. I really do beg you. Please read, right? It'd be interesting, right? It's very interesting, and it won't harm you, right? And then if you have read, then it's good. Very happy, and continue to read so, and then try to read. And if you have any questions, if you do have any questions, please, how do you say in YouTube terms, you can on the comments. No, don't write in the comment section. If you have any questions, right, you can use your Google Classroom, right, and email me the questions, okay, and I will answer that, right, and I will reply to your questions uh, in the next video lecture. All right. So for now, we end here. Thank you all for attending my class, my lecture, and I'll see you very soon. Okay. Thank you. Bye. If you have any questions, right, you can use your Google Classroom, right?